In the shadow of the untamed Arizona territory of 1876, Sarah Mitchell cradles her infant daughter, their faces illuminated by flickering candlelight in a humble desert cabin. The baby's distinctive jade-green eyes hold a secret that burns in Sarah's heart. They're identical to those of a mysterious stranger from her past. As she rocks gently in her grandmother's chair, her fingers trace the edges of a worn leather journal, its pages filled with unanswered questions about her child's father. Outside, the wind carries whispers of Apache drums across the desert, and somewhere in the vast expanse of the western frontier, a man with those same haunting eyes is making his way toward a destiny he doesn't yet understand. Could the approaching stranger be the one to heal their broken family? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The desert dawn crept through the cabin's weathered curtains, painting Sarah's world in shades of amber and gold. Her grandmother's rocking chair, the only piece of furniture she'd brought from her Boston life, creaked softly beneath her as she nursed Emma. The sound reminded her of home, of parlor conversations and crystal chandeliers, of a life that now seemed as distant as the stars that had guided her west. Emma's tiny fingers curled around a loose strand of Sarah's hair, tugging gently. The simple gesture brought tears to her eyes, not of pain, but of fierce love for this child who had become her entire world. In Emma's face, Sarah saw echoes of the life she'd left behind, particularly in those striking jade-green eyes that seemed to hold all the secrets of her past. "Hush now, little one," she whispered, more to herself than to her daughter. The morning routine had become her anchor. Feed Emma, tend to the chickens, check the water barrel, and scan the horizon for dust clouds that might signal approaching riders. Fear had become as familiar as her own reflection, a constant companion since that night she'd fled Boston's society circles with nothing but a handful of coins and her grandmother's chair strapped to a borrowed wagon. A knock at the door sent her heart racing. 3 sharp raps, Martha's signal. Sarah's shoulders relaxed as she crossed the rough-hewn floorboards, Emma balanced on her hip. Martha, the town's midwife, had been her salvation these past months, bringing supplies and, more precious still, news and companionship. "Land's sake, child, you're looking peaked," Martha declared, bustling in with her usual basket of provisions. The older woman's sun-weathered face creased with concern as she set her burden on the table. "And Miss Emma's growing like a desert flower after rain, isn't she?" Sarah managed a smile, watching as Martha unpacked bread, dried meat, and luxury of luxuries, a small jar of honey. "She's sleeping through the night now, most nights anyway." "Good, good." Martha's hands never stopped moving as she spoke, arranging supplies with the efficiency of long practice. "Though I'd wager you're not doing the same, are you? Still keeping watch?" Sarah turned away, pretending to adjust Emma's blanket. Martha knew her too well. The nightmares had become less frequent, but the fear remained. Fear of being found, of having Emma taken from her, of facing the consequences of her choices. "There's talk in town," Martha continued, her voice carefully neutral. "Apache movements in the territory, army patrols increasing, change is coming, whether we like it or not." The word Apache sent a shiver down Sarah's spine. She'd heard stories since arriving in the territory, tales of raids and revenge, but also whispers of honor and ancient wisdom. The natives remained a mystery to her, like so much of this harsh land. "I've been thinking," Martha said, pausing in her work. "Maybe it's time you considered joining us in town. The cabin's too isolated, especially with a little one. Sheriff Wilson's a good man. He'd help keep you safe." Sarah shook her head, a familiar argument rising to her lips. "The town's too public, too many questions. Emma needs her mother whole and well," Martha interrupted gently. "And you need more than just these 4 walls and old memories." The midwife's words struck home, but Sarah couldn't yield. Her fingers found the leather journal tucked in her apron pocket. Her own story, written in careful script during lonely nights. Someday she'd share it with Emma, explain why they lived as they did, why they couldn't trust easily or live openly. The rest of Martha's visit passed in comfortable routine, checking Emma's health, sharing quiet gossip about town happenings, planning for future needs. But as the older woman prepared to leave, she paused at the door, her face grave. "Sarah, remember what I taught you about the desert, how it looks empty but it's full of life if you know where to look." She waited for Sarah's nod. "Well, sometimes what looks like safety, isolation, hiding, can be more dangerous than facing what's coming. Just think on it." After Martha left, Sarah returned to her rocking chair, Emma drowsing against her shoulder. Outside, a red-tailed hawk circled lazily in the morning thermals, free and untethered. She envied its liberty, even as she acknowledged the wisdom in Martha's words. The desert had taught her patience, resilience, and the art of survival. But as Emma grew, would this hidden life be enough? Could she keep running from the past when it lived in her daughter's eyes? She opened her journal, adding another entry to the growing collection. One day, these pages would tell Emma everything about the military ball where she'd met a handsome cavalry officer with jade green eyes, about the scandal that had driven her west, about the choices that had led them to this sun-baked cabin on the edge of civilization. For now, though, the words remained private, a confession without absolution, a love story without an ending. Emma stirred, her small face turning toward the window where the desert light painted the world in shades of possibility. Sarah held her closer, breathing in the sweet scent of her baby's hair. Together, they rocked in the chair that bridged past and present, watching the sun climb higher over their sanctuary of secrets. The general store's bell jangled as the stranger pushed through the door, bringing with him the scent of sage and saddle leather. Conversation died like a snuffed candle as he removed his dust-covered cavalry hat, revealing dark hair streaked with silver at the temples. But it was his eyes that drew every gaze, jade green and sharp as desert glass, taking in the store's interior with military precision. Behind the counter, Tom Fletcher straightened his apron, watching the newcomer with the careful neutrality that had kept him alive through 20 years of frontier commerce. "Help you find something, mister?" James Connor. The stranger's voice carried the refined edge of an Eastern education, at odds with his trail-worn appearance. "Looking for information, more than goods." He placed his hat on the counter, and Tom noted the cavalry insignia, tarnished but still visible. Outside, Martha was crossing the street toward the store, Emma bundled in her arms. She'd insisted on taking the baby for the afternoon, giving Sarah a few precious hours of uninterrupted rest. The sight of the strange horse tied outside made her pause, maternal instinct prickling. Inside, Connor was speaking again, his words measured and deliberate. "I'm tracking missing persons, Boston society folk who might have passed through here in the last year or so." He withdrew a folded paper from his vest. "Families offering a reward for information." The store's other patrons drifted closer, drawn by the mention of reward money. Tom's wife, Susan, emerged from the back room, her curiosity evident in her quick steps. But Sheriff Wilson, who'd been quietly purchasing tobacco in the corner, moved forward with purpose. "That's my jurisdiction you're talking about, Mr. Connor." The sheriff's hand rested casually near his holster. "Maybe we should discuss this in my office." Connor's eyes met Wilson's, something unspoken passing between the men. "Of course, Sheriff, though I'd appreciate any information the good citizens here might have first." Martha chose that moment to enter, the bell's cheerful ring a counterpoint to the tension. Emma, disturbed by the motion, began to fuss, and then something extraordinary happened. Connor's composed expression cracked, his jade-green eyes fixing on the child with an intensity that made Martha's breath catch. The baby turned at the sound of the bell, and for one heart-stopping moment, identical pairs of jade-green eyes met across the store. Connor took half a step forward before catching himself, his hand gripping the counter's edge. Sheriff Wilson didn't miss the reaction. "My office, now!" Connor recovered his composure, but his eyes lingered on Emma as Martha hurried past, keeping the baby's face turned away. He retrieved his hat, settling it with military precision. "Much obliged for your time," he said to Tom, though his attention remained on the door through which Martha had disappeared. As Connor followed the sheriff out, Susan Fletcher hurried to the window. "Did you see his eyes?" she whispered to No, one in particular. "Just like that Mitchell woman's baby." "Hush now," Tom cautioned, but the words had already taken flight, ready to race through town like wildfire. Martha didn't wait to hear more. She hustled toward Sarah's cabin, her mind racing faster than her feet could carry her. The stranger's arrival complicated everything. His eastern manner, those distinctive eyes, the missing persons case. It couldn't be coincidence. The truth. She'd helped Sarah hide. These past months suddenly felt as fragile as a spider's web in a dust storm. She looked down at Emma, those telling eyes now closed in peaceful sleep, and quickened her pace. Sarah needed to know, needed to prepare. The quiet life she'd built in the desert was about to change, one way or another. Behind her the town hummed with fresh gossip, and somewhere between the sheriff's office and the general store, a story was taking shape. A story about a Boston society woman, a mysterious cavalry officer, and a baby with jade-green eyes that spoke of secrets too big for a small desert town to keep. Sarah knew something was wrong the moment Martha returned with Emma. The midwife's hurried steps and tight expression spoke volumes before she uttered a word. But it was Martha's careful, searching look that sent ice through Sarah's veins. "He's here," Martha said simply, passing Emma back to her mother. Sarah didn't need to ask who. Her fingers found the leather journal in her pocket, a habit born of anxiety, as she sank into the rocking chair. "Tell me." As Martha recounted the scene at the general store, Sarah's mind drifted to the journal's pages, to an entry written in elaborate script. Its ink now faded, but the memory sharp as broken glass. October 15th, 1875. Boston, the military ball at Hamilton House. Mother insisted I wear grandmother's pearls. They catch the light, just so, darling. But it wasn't the pearls that caught my eye that night. It was him, Lieutenant James Connor, newly promoted with eyes like spring leaves and a smile that promised adventure. When he asked me to dance, I felt the whole world shift beneath my feet. "Sarah, are you hearing me?" Martha's voice pulled her back to the present. "He's asking questions, looking for missing Boston society folk." Sarah clutched Emma closer, breathing in her sweet, powder-fresh scent. "Did he recognize her? Did he see those eyes? Hard to miss?" Martha sat heavily in the room's other chair. "It was like looking at a mirror, Sarah." He saw it too, clear as day. Another memory surfaced, this one written in shaky script during a stormy night on the Trail West, December 3rd, 1875. The scandal would have killed Mother. A military man, Sarah, and not even a proper officer family. But they didn't know him like I did, didn't see how he spoke to his men, how he treated the stable boys with respect, how he dreamed of bringing justice to the territories. When the pregnancy was discovered, Father gave me two choices: a convenient marriage to old Judge Barrett or permanent exile. I chose freedom, for myself, for my baby, for the love I couldn't deny. Sheriff Wilson took him to his office, Martha continued. "But Sarah, this isn't some regular bounty hunter. He carries himself like authority, and that cavalry insignia on his hat." Sarah's hand trembled as she opened the journal, turning to its most recent pages. She'd written about her fears here, about the future she dreamed of for Emma, about the regrets that visited her in the darkest hours of night. But she'd never written the whole truth about James, how deeply she'd loved him, how completely she'd trusted their future together, how devastated she'd been when his deployment orders came suddenly, sending him to the territories before she could tell him about the child. "He's investigating missing persons," Sarah murmured, half to herself. My father's work, no doubt. He never could accept defeat. Martha leaned forward, her face grave. The town's already talking. Susan Fletcher saw the resemblance. It won't take long for word to spread. Emma stirred in Sarah's arms, those telltale eyes blinking open. Sarah had seen that same questioning look countless times in another face, across candlelit dinners and secret meetings in the Hamilton house. Gardens. She'd been so young then, so certain that love could conquer all obstacles. I should have burned this, Sarah said, holding up the journal. Destroyed the evidence. No, Martha's voice was firm. Those words are Emma's heritage, her story. And maybe, she hesitated, maybe it's time for her father to know his part in it. Sarah stood, moving to the window. The desert stretched endlessly before her, painted in the fierce colors of sunset. Somewhere out there, James Connor was asking questions, following a trail that led straight to her door. The very thing she'd feared for so long was now inevitable. She opened the journal one last time, adding a final line in careful script, the past rides toward us on desert winds. What was hidden will soon be revealed. May God grant us the strength for what comes next. Martha, she said quietly, I need you to deliver a message. That night, Emma's fever took them all by surprise. One moment the child was sleeping peacefully. The next, she burned like desert sand at noon. Sarah pressed cool cloths to her daughter's forehead, whispering desperate prayers into the darkness, while Martha rode for the doctor, but it was someone else who answered their prayers. The soft tap at the back door made Sarah freeze. It wasn't Martha's familiar knock, nor the heavy-handed authority of the law. Instead, it was gentle, deliberate, like rain on dry earth. Sarah Mitchell. The voice was female, accented, and somehow familiar. Your child needs medicine. Sarah peered through the window to find a figure wrapped in a dark blanket, her face weathered by sun and time. Around her neck hung a beaded medicine pouch that caught the moonlight. Sarah had seen her before at the edge of town, trading healing herbs with Martha. Running deer, the woman said simply. Martha sent me. The choice wasn't really a choice at all. Emma's small body trembled with fever, and Sarah had run out of options. She opened the door. Running deer moved with quiet efficiency, her experienced hands gentle as she examined Emma. From her medicine pouch, she produced herbs that smelled of sage and something sweeter, unfamiliar. Your child has the summer fever, she explained, mixing the herbs with water. Many children suffer when the dry winds come. As she worked, she spoke softly in a mixture of English and Apache, her words carrying the weight of ancient wisdom. The fever is like a dust storm. It must pass through before the air can clear. She held the medicine to Emma's lips. But we can shelter her from the worst of it. Sarah watched, hope warring with fear in her heart. Why are you helping us? Running Deer's dark eyes held Sarah's gaze. Because Martha trusts you. Because your child is innocent of the troubles between our peoples. And because I see in you what I once was, a mother alone, fighting to protect her young. As the medicine took effect, Emma's breathing eased. Running Deer produced a small pouch like her own, this one decorated with carefully sewn beadwork. Keep these herbs close. They will guard against future fevers. The gift represented more than medicine. It was an offering of trust, a bridge between worlds. Sarah's fingers traced the intricate beadwork. I don't know how to thank you. Learn. Our ways, Running Deer replied. Understand that not all enemies are those who look different. Sometimes the greatest danger wears a familiar face. She paused, her expression growing serious. There is talk in town of a man who shares your child's eyes. Sarah's hand tightened on the medicine pouch. Have you seen him? He speaks our language, Running Deer said, surprising Sarah. He has ridden with Apache scouts. They call him Green. Eyes who sees true. He is known to be fair in his dealings with our people. The revelation struck Sarah like a physical blow. The James she'd known in Boston had spoken of working with native tribes, of building understanding between peoples. To hear that he'd actually done it, had earned the respect of the Apache, it made her heart ache with remembered pride. The winds are changing, Running Deer continued, gathering her blanket. More soldiers come to the territory, more fences, more rules. Soon my people must choose, fight or move to the reservations. She touched Emma's cooling forehead gently. Your child bridges two worlds, like the medicine in her veins tonight. Remember that, when the time comes, to make your own choice. After Running Deer left, Sarah sat in her grandmother's chair, holding Emma close as the fever gradually released its grip. The medicine pouch hung around her neck now, its weight a reminder of unexpected friendships and the complexity of the path ahead. Outside, coyotes called to each other across the vast desert night. Sarah remembered James once telling her that coyotes were survivors, adaptable, able to thrive in the harshest conditions. Perhaps that's what she needed to become, not just someone who hid from the past, but someone who could adapt to whatever future approached on the horizon. Emma sighed in her sleep, her face peaceful now. Sarah touched the medicine pouch, then reached for her journal. Tonight's entry would be different, not a record of what she'd lost, but a testament to what she'd found here in the desert, strength, wisdom, and allies who transcended the boundaries of race and culture. The military commission papers lay on Sheriff Wilson's desk, like a hand of cards, dealt face up. James Connor, now Captain Connor, traced his fingers over the official seal, aware of the sheriff's scrutiny from across the room. Mighty interesting. Orders you've got there, Captain, Wilson said, loading his pipe with deliberate care. Missing persons case seems an unusual assignment for a decorated cavalry officer. These are unusual times, Sheriff. James kept his voice neutral, though his heart raced at what he'd discovered in town. Those eyes, Emma's eyes, his eyes, there could be no mistake. And does your unusual assignment have anything to do with Sarah Mitchell and her child? The question hung in the air like gun smoke. James met Wilson's steady gaze. You've been protecting them. Protecting a woman and child who've done no wrong? Yes, I have. Wilson struck a match, the flare illuminating his weathered face. Question is, what are your intentions toward them? James withdrew a folded letter from his vest pocket, the paper worn soft at the creases from frequent handling. When Sarah disappeared from Boston, her father claimed she'd been coerced, kidnapped. He used his influence to launch a military investigation. He placed the letter beside his commission papers. But that's not why I'm here. No? Wilson's expression remained carefully neutral. I received this letter 3 months ago. Anonymous, postmarked from your town. James smoothed the paper flat, revealing elegant handwriting he'd recognize anywhere. Just 3 words. She has your eyes. Understanding dawned on Wilson's face. Martha, he said softly. Had to be Martha. I requested this assignment, Sheriff. Pulled every string I had. James's composure cracked slightly. I have a daughter, don't I? Wilson puffed his pipe thoughtfully. What I know or don't know about Miss Mitchell's situation isn't mine to tell, but I will say this. That child is the light of her mother's life. The very air she breathes. Sarah's father wants her brought back to Boston. The official orders are clear. James stood, gathering his papers with military precision. But orders can be interpreted in many ways. And how do you plan to interpret them, Captain? Before James could answer, hurried footsteps sounded on the boardwalk outside. Martha burst through the door, her usually calm demeanor shattered. Sheriff! The baby's sick, summer fever, Running Deer's with them, but... She stopped short at the sight of James. He was already reaching for his hat. Take me to them. Now. Wait just a minute, Wilson began, but James cut him off. Sheriff, that's my child out there, my flesh and blood, burning with fever. I've lost 2 years already. I won't lose another minute. Martha looked between the 2 men, then nodded slowly. Sarah sent me to find you anyway, Captain. She says it's time you knew the whole truth. She touched the worn leather journal tucked in her apron pocket, Sarah's most prized possession, entrusted to her for this moment. But understand this. If your presence brings harm to that girl or her baby, there's not a badge or commission in the world that will protect you. James accepted the journal with trembling hands, recognizing Sarah's handwriting on its pages. I never knew, he whispered. I was deployed so suddenly that she never had the chance to tell me. Well, Martha said briskly, you know now. Question is, what are you going to do about it? The answer crystallized in James's mind with military clarity. His orders, his commission, his duty, all of it paled against the reality of his child fighting fever in a desert cabin. The truth he'd sought for 2 years had found him instead, bringing with it a responsibility that transcended military authority. Take me to my family, he said simply. As they rode into the gathering dusk, James clutched Sarah's journal against his heart, feeling the weight of unspoken truths finally shifting toward revelation. Behind them, Sheriff Wilson watched them go, his pipe glowing like a beacon in the deepening shadows. The game had changed, and they all knew it. The only question now was whether love could bridge the chasm that time and circumstance had carved. Between two hearts that had never truly stopped beating as one, the telegraph arrived at dawn, its message stark against the yellow paper. Additional troops deployed. Stop Apache relocation orders. Confirmed. Stop proceed with original mission stop. Tom Fletcher's hands shook as he delivered it to the sheriff's office, where James had spent the night poring over Sarah's journal. The words hit James like physical blows. He'd known this was coming. The military had been building toward this action for months. But now, with Emma's fever barely broken and the truth of his family finally within reach, the timing felt like a cruel joke from fate. Sarah stood at the cabin window, watching running deer gather fresh herbs in the pale morning light. The medicine woman had stayed through the night, her quiet presence an anchor in the storm of emotions that had swept through the small home. Now, with Emma sleeping peacefully, Sarah could feel the weight of James's eyes on her back. You wrote everything down, he said softly, the journal open in his hands. Every hope, every fear, every moment I missed. I wanted her to know her father, Sarah replied, not turning. Even if she never met you. The floorboards creaked as he moved closer. Sarah, about the deployment, I know. I tried to send word to the fort, but you'd already gone. Her fingers traced patterns on the window pane. By then, Father had already arranged everything. Judge Barrett was waiting with the marriage license, and She took a shuddering breath. I chose to run. You chose freedom, James corrected, echoing her own words from the journal. You chose our child. Outside, running deer straightened suddenly, her head turning toward the east like a deer scenting danger. Sarah felt it too, a change in the air, a tension that had nothing to do with the conversation behind her. Riders coming, running deer called softly. James moved to the window, his shoulder brushing Sarah's. The touch sent electricity through her skin, just as it had that first night at the military ball. Military patrol, he confirmed grimly. And they're carrying relocation orders. Sarah's hand flew to the medicine pouch at her neck, running deer's gift, symbol of a trust about to be tested. They'll force them onto reservations. They'll try. James's voice held a complexity of emotion that made her finally turn to face him. The morning light caught his jade-green eyes, so like Emma's, filled with the same battle between duty and conscience she remembered from their Boston days. Captain Connor. The call came from outside, formal and demanding. James's hand found hers, warm and calloused. Sarah, listen carefully. What I do next will be what you believe is right, she finished. It always was, with you. He smiled then, the expression transforming his face into the one she'd fallen in love with years ago. They've learned a few things from the Apache about seeing clearly through dust storms. Trust me? Before she could answer, Emma stirred in her crib, whimpering. Running Deer was already moving, her medicines ready. But it was James who reached their daughter first. Sarah watched as his large hands gently lifted Emma, as natural as if he'd been doing it since her birth. "Sir," the voice outside held growing impatience, "we have orders." "Yes," James said softly, cradling Emma close. "We all have orders. The question is which ones we choose to follow." He turned to Running Deer. "Tell your people, the storm is here." The medicine woman nodded once sharply and slipped out the back door like a shadow. Sarah felt the weight of the moment pressing down, years of hiding and running crystallizing into this single point of decision. "James," she whispered. "Whatever. I'm planning to protect my family," he said firmly. "All of my family, including those who've watched over you when I couldn't." He pressed a kiss to Emma's forehead, then handed her back to Sarah. "Keep our daughter safe. I need to send a message of my own." As he strode out to meet the patrol, Sarah held Emma close, breathing in her sweet, fever-free scent. Through the window, she watched James Connor, decorated captain, her long-lost love, newly discovered father, square his shoulders and prepare to challenge the very authority he'd served so faithfully. The storm was gathering indeed, but for the first time since she'd fled Boston, Sarah felt not just the terror of its approach, but also the wild, desperate hope of weathering it together. Sarah's fingers trembled as she opened the silver locket, her mother's final gift before the scandal broke. Inside, two miniature portraits faced each other across a golden hinge. Her parents in their prime, painted with delicate strokes that captured her father's stern dignity and her mother's gentle smile. She'd kept it hidden all these months, a reminder of everything she'd left behind. Now, watching James confront the patrol through the cabin window, she wondered if her father had ever faced such a moment of choice between duty and heart. "Captain Connor," Lieutenant Hayes was saying, his young face puzzled. "These orders come directly from command. The Apache must be moved to the reservation immediately." James stood with parade ground precision, his voice carrying clearly in the morning air. "I'm aware of the orders, Lieutenant. I'm also aware that Running Deer's band has been peaceful, trading fairly with the town and providing medical aid to settlers. Sir, with respect, that's not relevant to our mission." "Everything is relevant when you're asking men to uproot families." James's words carried the weight of experience. "These are not hostile raiders we're discussing, but women, children, elders." Sarah saw the conflict in the younger officer's face. Behind him, the patrol shifted uneasily in their saddles, several nodding almost imperceptibly at James's words. They'd all seen enough of territory politics to know the difference between justice and orders. Inside the cabin, Martha appeared at Sarah's elbow. "Town meeting's been called," she murmured. "Sheriff Wilson wants everyone to hear both sides." Sarah clutched the locket tighter. "Both sides? Martha, there aren't two sides to forcing people from their homes." "No," Martha agreed, "but there are two sides to every story, and it's time the town heard yours." She produced a folded paper from her apron, a letter in familiar handwriting. "This came with the military dispatch. From your father." Sarah's heart stuttered. She opened the letter with shaking hands. "My dearest daughter, pride has kept me from writing these words sooner. Your mother's death last winter changed everything. Her final request was that I find you, that I make amends. The world is changing, Sarah. The frontier you fled to is vanishing. Come home, bring my grandchild. The past can be forgiven if we only have the courage to face it. With love, Father." "Sarah." James's voice made her look up. He stood in the doorway. Now his expression grave. "They've given us 24 hours to comply with the relocation orders. Or they'll bring in additional troops to enforce compliance." He crossed to her, his eyes falling on the open locket. "Is that them? Your parents?" She nodded, unable to speak. James studied the miniatures, his face softening. "You have your mother's eyes, though our daughter seems to have inherited mine." The simple acknowledgement of Emma as their daughter broke something loose in Sarah's chest. She showed him the letter. "He wants us to come home." James read it quickly, his jaw tightening. "And Running Deer's people, where is their home to be?" The question hung in the air as Emma began to stir in her crib. Sarah lifted her, breathing in the sweet baby scent that still carried traces of Running Deer's healing herbs. The medicine pouch hung nearby, a reminder of debts that couldn't be repaid with mere gratitude. "The town meeting," Martha prompted gently. "They need to hear from both of you." Sarah looked at James, seeing in his face the same struggle she felt, between what was easy and what was right, between the pull of the past and the demands of the present. She touched the locket, then deliberately closed it, letting the portraits fall hidden once more. "Then let's make sure they hear the truth," she said. "All of it." James's smile held pride and something deeper. "Together?" "Together." Sarah squared her shoulders, feeling strength flow from the simple word. "Martha, would you watch Emma and—" She hesitated, then pressed the locket into the older woman's hands. "Keep this safe. The past has its place, but right now we need to focus on the future." As they walked toward town, Sarah felt the weight of multiple loyalties pulling at her heart, to her parents and her past, to Running Deer and the debt she owed, to the town that had sheltered her, and to the man beside her who was choosing his own path through divided loyalties. But strongest of all was her loyalty to the truth she'd written in her journal, the truth about love and courage, about choosing what was right over what was easy. The town hall waited ahead, its windows bright with morning sun. Inside, settlers and shopkeepers, ranchers and traders would gather to decide the fate of their neighbors. Sarah lifted her chin, ready at last to stand in the light of truth, no matter the cost. Some loyalties, she had learned, were worth any price. The town hall buzzed with tension as James stood before the gathered crowd, his cavalry orders heavy in his hands. Sarah sat in the front row beside Martha, who held Emma close. Running Deer had chosen to remain outside, but her presence was felt in the medicine pouch still hanging around Sarah's neck. "As an officer of the United States Cavalry," James began, his voice carrying to the rafters, "I am bound by orders to oversee the relocation of all Apache tribes in this territory to the designated reservation lands." He paused, scanning the faces before him. "As a man who has ridden with Apache scouts, learned their ways, and seen their humanity, I cannot in good conscience enforce these orders without speaking the truth as I know it." Sheriff Wilson leaned against the back wall, his weathered face unreadable. Susan Fletcher whispered to her husband, while other townspeople shifted in their seats, the weight of decision heavy in the air. "Running Deer's people have been peaceful," James continued. "They've shared their medicine, their knowledge of the land. They've helped us survive in a territory that would have defeated many of us otherwise." His eyes found Sarah's. "They've protected those who needed protection, asked no questions, passed no judgment. But the law's the law," someone called from the back. "We can't just ignore military orders." "No," James agreed, "we can't." With deliberate movements, he unpinned his captain's bars from his collar. They caught the light as he placed them atop. His orders on the podium, "Which is why I'm resigning my commission." A gasp rippled through the crowd. Sarah's heart thundered in her chest as James continued, his voice steady despite the magnitude of his decision. "I came to this territory tracking a missing woman and child. I found not only them, but also a truth larger than any military command. That justice and law are not always the same thing." He stepped away from the podium, moving to stand beside Sarah and Emma. "This is my family. These are our neighbors, and I will not be the instrument of their displacement." Martha squeezed Sarah's hand as James dealt the final blow to his military career. But before the murmuring crowd could respond, the door burst open. Lieutenant Hayes stood there, face flushed with urgency. "Captain Connor!" Riders approaching. From the east, a full company, led by Colonel Barrett himself. The name hit Sarah like a physical blow. Judge Barrett's son, the man her father had tried to force her to marry, now commanded the troops sent to enforce the relocation. The past was racing to meet them with the speed of cavalry horses. James's jaw tightened. How long? 2 hours, maybe less. Sheriff Wilson pushed away from the wall. Seems to me we've got a choice to make, and not much time to make it. He addressed the crowd directly. This town's built itself on looking after its own. Question is, who do we count as our own? Sarah stood, taking Emma from Martha. Her voice shook at first, but grew stronger with each word. When I came here, running from a life others had planned for me, this town took me in. Running Deer's people did the same. They didn't ask about my past or demand explanations. They simply helped because it was right. She touched the medicine, pouch at her throat. Now we have the chance to do the same for them. The town hall fell silent as her words sank in. Then Tom Fletcher stood. My store's got wagons. Could help move some of Running Deer's people, not to the reservation, but to safer ground. I know the old mining trails. Another voice added. Army patrols never use them. One by one, townspeople rose, offering help, suggesting routes, volunteering. Supplies. Sarah felt James's hand find hers, his grip warm and sure. The choice that had seemed so impossible moments ago was transforming into a path forward, carved by the collective will of a community choosing conscience over convenience. It won't be easy, James warned them. The army won't simply accept this. Nothing worthwhile ever is, Sheriff Wilson replied. He picked up James's discarded captain's bars, turning them over in his hands. Sometimes a man's got to choose between the stars on his collar and the stars that guide him true. He offered the bars back to James. Question is, Captain, which stars are you following? James looked at Sarah and Emma, at the townspeople now bustling with purpose, at the cavalry orders lying abandoned on the podium. In his eyes, Sarah saw the same certainty she'd fallen in love with years ago in Boston. Without words, she knew his choice. Their choice was made. The stars they would follow weren't pinned to any collar, but rather shone in the eyes of their daughter and in the hearts of people choosing to stand together against the tide of history. Running Deer's hand-drawn map glowed faintly in the lantern light, its charcoal lines showing hidden paths through the mountains that no army scout had ever traced. Sarah studied it intently as James loaded the last of their provisions onto the waiting horses. The old Apache trails lead north through Devil's Canyon, Running Deer explained, her finger tracing the route. Army horses cannot follow where we go. Too narrow, too steep. The night pressed close around them, moonless and thick, with tension. In the distance, a coyote called, once, twice, 3 times. Running Deer straightened. My people are ready. Sarah secured the map inside her jacket, close to her heart. Around them, the town had come alive with silent purpose. Wagons moved, without lanterns, loaded with supplies and Apache families. Tom Fletcher's store had been emptied of essential provisions, payment left on his counter in silver and turquoise. Sarah, Martha appeared from the shadows, Emma bundled securely in her arms. She's just been fed, should sleep through the worst of the journey. The older woman's eyes glistened as she handed over the baby. Martha, I can't thank you enough. Then, don't. Martha pressed a package into Sarah's hands. Food for the trail. And this. She produced a small leather pouch. Sheriff Wilson asked me to give you these. Inside the pouch, James's captain's bars caught the faint light. Sarah looked up questioningly. He says some stars are worth keeping, even if you can't wear them anymore. James appeared at Sarah's shoulder, his presence as steady as a heartbeat. The advance scouts report Barrett's company has stopped to water their horses at River Bend. Gives us maybe 2 hours lead. A soft whistle cut through the darkness, the signal. Around them, shapes moved in the night as the Apache began their journey north. Tom Fletcher's wagons creaked softly, heading east to draw attention from the true escape route. Time to go, James said softly. Sarah mounted carefully, Emma secure against her chest in a sling Running Deer had woven. the medicine pouch and map pressed against her heart like talismans. James swung into his saddle beside her, his eyes finding hers in the darkness. Sure about this? Sarah thought of her father's letter, of Boston's gilded halls, of the life she'd left behind. Then she looked at James, at their sleeping daughter, at the trust running deers people had placed in them. Never been more sure. They rode out as silently as shadows, following running deer's lead. The town fell away behind them, its windows dark in solidarity with their escape. Sheriff Wilson had arranged for the Army Patrol's horses to develop mysterious lameness, buying precious time. The trail grew steeper, narrower, branches brushed their faces like questioning fingers. Emma stirred but didn't wake, soothed by the rhythm of the horses' careful steps. Ahead, running deer moved like smoke between the trees, reading the land with generations of knowledge in her bones. A shot cracked through the night, distant toward the east. The diversion was working, drawing Barrett's men toward the wagons. Instead of the mountain trails, James touched his horse closer to Sarah's. Tom Fletcher and his people know what to do, he assured her. They'll lead the army on a merry chase, then claim they were moving supplies to the northern settlements. Sarah nodded, unable to speak past the tightness in her throat. They were leaving behind more than a town. They were leaving the last traces of their old lives, riding into an uncertain future with only trust and love as their compass. The moon finally rose, a thin crescent that painted the landscape in silver shadows. Running deer called a halt at a hidden spring, allowing the horses to drink. As Sarah dismounted, she felt the weight of the map, the medicine pouch, and James's captain's bars against her heart, physical reminders of all they carried with them. Knowledge, healing, honor, and hope. Emma woke briefly, her jade-green eyes reflecting starlight. Looking into them, Sarah saw not the past they were fleeing, but the future they were riding toward. A future where love chose its own trail, and where the stars that guided them shone from the hearts of those brave enough to choose justice over convenience. The journey ahead was long and dangerous, but they weren't riding alone. They carried with them the trust of a town, the wisdom of an ancient people, and the strength of a love that had refused to be denied. In the darkness of their flight, these things shone brighter than any star. Dawn broke over the mountain camp in layers of purple and gold, catching on the edges of a finely woven blanket that an elderly Apache woman was wrapping around Sarah's shoulders. The cloth was thick with symbols, zigzag patterns representing the mountain paths that had led them to safety, arrows pointing north toward hope, and circles within circles speaking of family and unity. For the one who chose truth over comfort, the woman said in halting English, touching the blanket's intricate patterns. Running deer says you understand this choice. Sarah pulled the blanket closer, its warmth a comfort after the cold mountain night. Across the camp, James spoke quietly with a group of Apache scouts, his words a mixture of English and their native tongue. Emma played nearby with several Apache children, her laughter bridging the language barrier that separated their worlds. The camp itself was a study in efficient beauty. Lodges rose among the pines, positioned to catch the morning sun while remaining hidden from the valleys below. Smoke from cooking fires disappeared into the forest canopy, dispersed by clever arrangements of hides that running deer's people had developed over generations. Your man speaks with our heart, the elderly woman observed, watching James. Many moons ago, he lived among us, learned our ways. Now he returns, bringing truth speakers with him. Sarah touched the medicine pouch still hanging at her neck. We've brought danger to your people. Danger walks all paths in these days, Running Deer said, approaching with herbs for the morning meal. Better to face it standing together than falling alone. She handed Sarah a sprig of sage. For cleansing, the old life must be washed away before the new one can take root. A commotion at the edge of camp drew their attention. One of the scouts who'd stayed behind to watch their back trail rode in, his face grave with news. James strode to meet him, listening intently to his report. Barrett's men have split up. James announced, returning to their fire, half still following Tom Fletcher's wagons east, but the others are searching the mountain trails. They're being led by a tracker from the reservation. Sarah's hands tightened on the gifted blanket. How long? 2 days, maybe 3, before they find this trail. James sat beside her, his face thoughtful. The camp can be moved higher into the mountains, but with the winter coming, Running Deer added more sage to the fire, letting its cleansing smoke rise around them. There is another way. The people have always known it, though few settlers have seen it. She looked at James. You remember the high canyon? The one your people called Devil's Tears? Recognition flickered in James's eyes. The hidden valley. But that's just a story the scouts tell. He stopped, seeing the knowledge in Running Deer's steady gaze. My grandfather's grandfather found it, she said simply. A place where the mountains cradle a valley like a mother holds her child. Water flows, grass grows, and the winter winds cannot find it. We have kept it secret, saved it for the time of greatest need. She met Sarah's eyes. That time is now. Emma toddled over, her face smudged with clay from playing with the other children. A young Apache girl followed, showing Emma how to shape the clay into simple animals. Looking at them, Sarah saw the future Running Deer spoke of, a place where children of different worlds could play together, where ancient wisdom and new hope might grow side by side. James touched the captain's bars he now wore on a leather thong around his neck. A secret valley. It would have to be defended, protected. That is why the people have chosen this time to share its knowledge, Running Deer said. You understand both worlds. Speak with both tongues. Your heart knows the truth of both paths. She touched the blanket around Sarah's shoulders. And your family bridges the gap between our peoples. The elderly woman who had gifted the blanket nodded approvingly. The valley has waited for those who would understand its purpose. Not to hide, but to heal. Not to separate, but to bring together. Sarah watched Emma playing with her new friend, their small hands shaping clay into dreams only children could fully imagine. The blanket around her shoulders seemed to grow warmer, its patterns telling a story of paths chosen and truths embraced. How far? She asked softly. Running Deer smiled. For those who know the way, 2 days' journey. For those who hunt us, it might as well be forever. The morning sun climbed higher, turning the mountain mists to gold. In its light, Sarah saw not an ending, but a beginning. A new path forward that honored both what they had left behind and what they had found in the courage to choose love over fear, truth over comfort, and hope over hatred. The wanted poster fluttered in the mountain breeze. James Connor's face rendered in harsh woodcut lines beneath the damning words, "Deserter, $500 reward." Running Deer's scouts had stripped it from a tree at the canyon's mouth, proof that Barrett's men had embraced a new strategy, turning their quarry from military targets into outlaws. They're getting desperate, James said, studying his own likeness. Barrett knows these mountains will be impassable once the winter storms arrive. Sarah watched from the lodge entrance as Emma learned to grind corn with the Apache women, their soft songs carrying on the wind. 2 days in the mountain camp had changed their daughter, her movements more sure, her eyes brighter with each new discovery. The valley preparations continue, Running Deer reported, appearing silently beside them. The old ones say the signs are good. Elk moving north, hawks circling the hidden passes. The winter will come early this year. Horses. Winnie cut through the calm morning. One of the lookouts signaled from his hidden post, 3 fingers raised, then 2. 5 riders approaching. Bounty hunters, James said grimly. Barrett must have hired local trackers. The camp erupted into silent action, a well-rehearsed dance of survival. Women doused fires with sand. Children gathered hunting decoys that had been drying in the sun, and warriors melted into the trees with bows drawn. Sarah, Martha's voice startled her. She still wasn't used to seeing her old friend dressed in Apache garments, her grey hair bound with leather strips. The midwife had caught up with them yesterday, bringing news from town. Take Emma to the cave, just like we practiced. Sarah scooped up her daughter, who understood enough to remain quiet. The cave entrance lay behind a curtain of water, the perfect hiding place for those who couldn't fight. Martha followed with her medicine bag and Running Deer's oldest granddaughter, who had been teaching Emma the Apache words for animals. James caught Sarah's arm before she disappeared into the cave. "Whatever you hear, I know," she whispered. "Be safe." His jade-green eyes held hers for a moment longer. Then he was gone, moving into position with the Apache warriors. Sarah ducked into the cave, where Emma immediately curled into her lap. Understanding the need for silence, through the falling water, they heard the bounty hunters approach. Horses stumbled on loose shale, riders cursed the treacherous path. Then James's voice rang out, clear and commanding. "This is sacred ground, gentlemen. I suggest you turn back." "Sacred ground don't mean much against $500, Captain," a rough voice answered. "Way I hear it, you're worth the same whether we bring you in breathing or not." Martha's hand found Sarah's in the darkness. Together, they listened to the deadly dance unfolding outside, the creak of saddle leather, the soft whisper of arrows being drawn. "Last chance," James called. "There are 24 arrows aimed at your hearts right now. Is Barrett's money worth dying for?" A long pause followed. Sarah could picture the bounty hunters scanning the trees, realizing too late they'd ridden into a trap. Finally, the spokesman answered, "Maybe not today, Captain. But Barrett's offering double for the woman and child. Says they're his family, stolen by a deserter. Man like that might not stop sending hunters. Then he'll learn what it means to hunt shadows." Running Deer's voice carried from somewhere in the trees. "This mountain keeps its secrets. Those who chase them too far don't return." The tension stretched like a bowstring. Sarah held her breath, feeling Emma's heart flutter against her chest like a trapped bird. Then came the sound of horses turning, hooves retreating down the trail. When James finally called the all clear, Sarah emerged to find the camp already returning to life. Fires rekindled, children reappeared from hiding places, and the warriors lounged casually in the trees as if they hadn't just faced down death. "They'll be back," James said, taking Emma from her arms. "With more men next time." "Then we'll be gone," Running Deer declared. "The valley awaits, 2 more days of preparation. Then we leave no trail for them to follow." Sarah touched the wanted poster, still clutched in James's hand. The face staring back at her wasn't the one she knew. It lacked the kindness in his eyes, the strength in his smile. Barrett's men were chasing a ghost, while the real James Connor stood beside her, their daughter in his arms, choosing a future that no bounty could buy. "Martha," she called softly, "would you help me prepare more healing packets? Something tells me we'll need them where we're going." As she worked with the midwife, binding herbs into travel-ready portions, Sarah watched the Apache women teaching Emma their songs. The wanted poster had named James a deserter, but Sarah saw the truth. He hadn't deserted his duty. He'd finally embraced it fully. Their duty now lay not in following orders, but in protecting this fragile bridge between worlds, this chance to build something new from the ashes of what they'd left behind. The peace pipe lay between them, its sacred symbols catching the firelight as Colonel Harrison surveyed the gathering. He sat cross-legged beside the council fire, his military bearings softened by decades of frontier experience. James had chosen him as negotiator specifically because of his reputation for fairness with the tribes. "Captain Connor," Harrison began, his weathered face grave, 15 years I've served with you. Never known you to act without reason." He gestured to the peace pipe. "So before we talk of charges or consequences, help me understand." Running Deer sat to Harrison's left, her presence lending authority to the council. Sarah remained standing, behind James, Emma sleeping peacefully in a cradleboard made by the Apache women. The entire camp had gathered to witness this meeting, though only the chosen representatives would speak. "Sir," James replied, "what would you have done? Barrett's trying to force these people onto reservation land that can't sustain them, separating families who've lived here for generations, and all to claim their hunting grounds for his cattle interests." Harrison's eyes flickered to Sarah and Emma. "And the personal matter became clear when I saw my daughter's eyes." James's voice carried across the hushed gathering. "Sarah fled a forced marriage to Barrett's son, a match arranged to cover up the truth about Emma's parentage. Barrett's using military authority for a private vendetta." Running Deer lifted the peace pipe, speaking in carefully chosen English. "Colonel Harrison, you know our people. Have we not kept peace these many seasons? Have we not shared our medicine, our knowledge of these lands?" "You have," Harrison acknowledged, "which is why I'm here instead of Barrett. But orders are orders, Running Deer. The reservation system is being implemented across all territories." "And if we showed you another way?" James leaned forward. "A solution that honors both the letter and the spirit of those orders?" Sarah touched the medicine pouch at her neck, drawing strength from its presence. "Colonel, when Running Deer's people saved my baby's life, they asked nothing in return. They didn't see a Boston socialite or a fugitive. They saw a mother in need. Surely there's room in your orders for that kind of wisdom." Harrison studied her thoughtfully. "Barrett's influence reaches far. He's convinced Washington that his son has legal claim to both you and the child, and his concerned citizen routine about Connor turning renegade has sympathetic ears in the capital." "Then let me show you something," Running Deer said, rising smoothly. "Something that may change how you see these mountains." She led them to a high point overlooking the hidden trail to the valley. The afternoon sun painted the peaks in shades of gold and shadow, revealing a landscape few white men had ever truly seen. "Our ancestors knew of a place," she explained, "where the mountains themselves keep watch. A valley deep enough to shelter, rich enough to sustain. The army seeks to put us on reservation land that cannot feed our children. But this place," she gestured to the distant peaks, "this place could be our reservation, one we choose freely." Harrison's military mask slipped, revealing genuine wonder at the vista before him. "A hidden valley? But surely it's been mapped." "No," James interrupted. "The Army's surveys missed it completely. I've seen the maps myself. As far as Washington knows, this is all impassable terrain." "And you're proposing a compromise," Sarah finished. "Running Deer's people settle in the valley, technically fulfilling the reservation requirement. They maintain their independence while still being within the letter of the law, and Barrett's men can search these mountains forever without finding them." Harrison stroked his moustache thoughtfully. "And what of you three?" James squared his shoulders. "I'll accept whatever consequences come from desertion, sir, but Sarah and Emma are under Apache protection now. By tribal law, they cannot be surrendered to anyone claiming false authority over them." "Tribal law?" Harrison's eyebrow rose. "You're invoking tribal law while facing military charges." "I'm invoking the truth," James replied quietly. "The same truth you've spent 15 years defending on this frontier. The truth that says some things matter more than stamps on paper or stars on collars." Running Deer lifted the peace pipe once more. "You are known to us, Colonel Harrison. Known as a man who sees with clear eyes. Will you look now? Will you see the path that brings honor to all?" The colonel was silent for a long moment, his gaze moving from the distant peaks to Emma's sleeping face, to the gathered Apache families waiting for his response. Finally he reached for the pipe. "Show me this valley," he said. "Show me a way to write orders that serve justice instead of pride." The pipe passed from hand to hand, and with each breath of sacred smoke, the battle lines began to blur, replaced by the first fragile sketches of a different kind of peace. James's cavalry badge lay in the dust between the opposing forces, its polished surface catching the morning sun. On one side stood Barrett and his men, their horses stamping restlessly in the mountain air. On the other, James and the Apache, Warriors held their ground before the hidden trail, with Colonel Harrison positioned between the groups like a human demarcation line. "This is your last chance, Connor," Barrett called, his face flushed with barely contained rage. "Surrender the woman and child, and perhaps the court-martial will show leniency." Sarah stood at the entrance to the narrow pass, Emma secure in Running Deer's arms behind her. The medicine woman had insisted on this position. "Let him see what he cannot have," she'd said. "Let him understand the power of a mother's choice." "Your son has no claim here, Barrett," James replied evenly. "Colonel Harrison has seen the evidence. The marriage contract was never valid, and you know it." Harrison stepped forward, his authority heavy in his voice. "Barrett, stand down. That's an order." "An order?" Barrett's laugh held no humor. "I have orders too, Colonel. Signed by the territorial governor himself. These Indians are to be relocated immediately, and my son's property returned." "Property?" Sarah's voice cut through the tension like a knife. "Is that what you think we are?" She moved forward, ignoring James's protective gesture. "Your son never loved me, Mr. Barrett. I was just another business acquisition, a way to merge your cattle empire with my father's shipping interests." "You ungrateful—" Barrett started to raise his rifle, but Harrison's voice cracked like a whip. "Point that weapon at a civilian again, and I'll have you in chains." Running Deer chose that moment to step forward, Emma still in her arms. The child's jade-green eyes, so like James's, fixed on Barrett with innocent curiosity. The older woman spoke in clear, carrying tones. "You speak of property, of ownership. But look at this child. In her blood runs the strength of two worlds. In her eyes shines the truth you cannot buy or sell. The Great Spirit has given her a path. Who are you to stand against such medicine?" Barrett's men shifted uncomfortably. They were frontier soldiers, many of whom had been helped by Apache medicine. Guided by Apache scouts, the sight of Running Deer holding Emma, the blending of worlds she represented, spoke to something deeper than orders or ambition. "My father sends his regards," Sarah added quietly, withdrawing a letter from her dress. "He arrived in town yesterday. Seems Mother's dying wish wasn't just about finding me." She held up the paper. "It was about exposing your attempts to manipulate her illness for financial gain." The color drained from Barrett's face. Behind him, his son, who had remained suspiciously quiet, suddenly spurred his horse forward. "Father, we have to—" "Silence!" Barrett roared, but the damage was done. His careful facade of righteous authority cracked, revealing the desperate scheming beneath. James moved to Sarah's side, his voice carrying to all present. "Colonel Harrison has approved Running Deer's proposal. The valley becomes a legal reservation, undisturbed by outside interests. My resignation from the cavalry is accepted without court-martial." He paused, meeting Barrett's gaze. "And Sarah's father has withdrawn all business interests from your ventures. It's over. Over." Barrett's hand tightened on his rifle. "I didn't spend 2 years building this empire to have it destroyed by a deserter and a runaway bride. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. Barrett raised his rifle. James moved to shield Sarah. Running Deer whispered something in Apache that made the air itself seem to hold its breath. And Emma laughed. The sound, pure, innocent, full of joy, echoed off the canyon walls. Barrett's finger froze on the trigger. Every face turned toward the child, who was reaching out toward a butterfly that had landed on Running Deer's medicine pouch. Colonel Harrison seized the moment. "Lieutenant Hayes, relieve Mr. Barrett of his weapon. He's under arrest for attempting to use military authority for personal gain." He turned to Barrett's son. "Unless you'd like to join your father in the territorial prison, I suggest you ride back to town. Now." As Harrison's men moved to carry out his orders, Sarah felt James's arms encircle her and Emma, who Running Deer had quietly transferred to her mother's embrace. The Apache warriors melted back into the rocks. The crisis passed. Behind them, the hidden trail to the valley waited, promising a future that none of them could have imagined in their separate pasts. "Seems your mother's last wish brought healing to more than just your family," James murmured. Sarah watched Barrett being led away, his empire of schemes collapsing like a house of cards. "Some medicine," she replied, touching Running Deer's pouch, "works in mysterious ways." The treaty document bore 3 signatures: Colonel Harrison's precise military hand, Running Deer's mark of flowing water, and James's bold strokes. Sarah traced the edges of the paper, still hardly believing what it represented. The Hidden Valley was now officially recognized as Apache territory, a reservation in name only, its location marked on army maps with deliberately vague boundaries. "Your father's influence helped," James said, watching her from the lodge entrance. "His testimony about Barrett's schemes convinced the territorial governor to accept our proposal." Sarah set the treaty carefully aside, moving to join him in the doorway. Below their elevated position, the valley spread out like a dream made real. Apache families were already settling in, their lodges rising among the trees, while children played in the meadow grass. "Did you ever imagine this?" she asked softly. "That night at the military ball when we first danced?" James chuckled, pulling her close. "I imagined a lot of things, but I never imagined our daughter would be learning Apache medicine songs before her English nursery rhymes." As if on cue, Emma's voice carried up from below, where she sat with Running Deer and several other children. The ancient healing chant sounded strange but perfect in her childish soprano, mixing with the other young voices in a blend of cultures that felt like hope. "Sarah?" A familiar voice called from the path. Martha appeared, accompanied by Sarah's father, who still looked somewhat out of place in his Eastern clothes, despite 2 weeks in the territory. "The last of Barrett's men rode out this morning," her father reported, accepting Sarah's embrace. "His cattle interests have been dissolved, and his son—" He hesitated, then smiled slightly. "Well, let's just say he's decided ranching in Texas might be a safer venture." Sarah studied her father's face, seeing the changes these weeks had wrought. Grief over her mother's death had softened his pride, and something about the valley's peace had begun to smooth the hard edges of his Boston manner. "The town send word?" James asked Martha. The midwife nodded, her face bright with news. "Sheriff Wilson's organized a regular trade route. Running Deer's medicines are in high demand, and the settlers are eager to learn from her people." She patted the bag at her hip. "I've got 6 new apprentices myself, learning both Western and Apache healing ways." Running Deer approached, Emma, riding on her shoulders. "The winter comes soon," she announced, "but the valley will shelter us well. The signs are good. Deer moving closer, berries heavy on the vines. The Great Spirit shows favor to this new path." Sarah's father cleared his throat. "About that path, I've been thinking my shipping business. It could help establish regular trade, not just with the town, but with other territories. Fair prices, honest dealings." He looked at Running Deer, almost shyly. "If your people are interested, of course." The medicine woman's eyes crinkled with amusement. "The proud Boston merchant learns new ways. Good. Trade built on respect builds more than wealth. It builds understanding." A commotion at the valley's entrance drew their attention. Colonel Harrison rode in, accompanied by Sheriff Wilson and Tom Fletcher's supply wagon. But it was the second wagon that made Sarah's heart leap. She recognized the driver's gray hair and gentle smile. "Grandmother?" The elderly woman was already climbing down, her movements spry despite her years. "Did you think I'd let your father have all the adventure? Besides," she added with a wink, "I brought you something." From the wagon, helpers lifted a familiar shape wrapped in blankets. Sarah's eyes filled with tears as the rocking chair, her anchor through so many storms, was carried toward their lodge. "A proper home needs a proper place to tell stories," her grandmother declared, "and it seems to me there are many stories here worth telling." As if to prove her point, several Apache children gathered around the chair as it was unwrapped, their eyes wide with curiosity. Running Deer spoke quietly to them in their language, and soon they were giggling at the chair's gentle motion. "Stories," James mused, watching Emma show her new friends how to make the chair rock. "Seems we're writing a new one." Sarah leaned against him, feeling the weight of the treaty in her pocket, seeing the future unfold in the valley before them. Their own path of redemption had led them here, but it was only the beginning. Around them, two worlds were learning to move as one, guided by love, understanding, and the courage to choose a different way. "The best stories," she said softly, "are the ones we write together." The land deed lay unfolded on the rough-hewn table, its official seals testament to a new kind of ownership. Not just Apache territory, not just reservation land, but something unprecedented. A shared trust, held jointly by the tribe and the settlers who had chosen to make the valley their home. "First of its kind," Sheriff Wilson said proudly, watching as Running Deer added her mark beside the other signatures. "A legal framework for two peoples to live as one community." The sheriff had relocated to the valley himself, establishing a small office that served more as a meeting place than a jail. The valley hadn't seen a single violent crime in the 3 months since its founding. James studied the deed thoughtfully. "Barrett's arrest opened more doors than we expected. The territorial governor seems eager to prove his commitment to fair dealings with the tribes. Eager to distance himself from scandal, more like," Sarah's father commented dryly. He had postponed his return to Boston indefinitely, his business interests now focused on establishing ethical trade routes throughout the territory. The change suited him. His face had lost its pinched city look, and he spent hours learning Apache customs from the tribal elders. Sarah watched the scene from her favorite spot near the lodge window. The valley had transformed with the early winter. Snow dusted the higher peaks, but down here, sheltered by the mountain walls, life flourished. Apache lodges stood alongside small cabins, while shared communal spaces hosted daily exchanges of knowledge, goods, and friendship. Martha had established a healing center where she worked alongside Running Deer, combining Western medicine with traditional Apache remedies. Their success rate had drawn attention from other territories, and a steady stream of patients made the journey to the valley, spreading word of its unique harmony. "Mama! Mama!" Emma's voice carried across the clearing. She rode on Tom Fletcher's shoulders, her face alight with excitement. "Look what Dancing Brook taught me." She held up a small piece of beadwork, its pattern simple but clear, a child's first attempt at the intricate art. "Beautiful little one," Sarah called back. Her artful. Emma had become a bridge between cultures in her own right, equally at home in both worlds. She spoke Apache as easily as English, and her games with the other children had evolved into a mysterious hybrid of both traditions. James appeared at her side, his arms sliding around her waist. "Running Deer says there's more snow coming. The valley's first real winter test." "We're ready," Sarah replied confidently. The community had worked together to prepare, combining Apache winter wisdom with settler knowledge. Stored food, shared resources, and carefully planned hunting rotations would see them through. Their lodge itself reflected this blending. Sarah's grandmother's rocking chair sat near a traditional Apache sleeping platform. Herbs dried from the rafters, while books lined rough shelves. Emma's cradleboard leaned against a Boston trunk, and James's cavalry badge hung beside Running Deer's medicine pouch, reminders of the paths that had led them here. Outside, the sound of children's laughter, mixed with women's work songs and the rhythmic chopping of firewood. Sarah's grandmother sat with a group of Apache elders, their hands moving in shared craftwork as they exchanged stories. The old woman had taken to valley life with unexpected enthusiasm, declaring that she felt younger here than she had in decades. Riders, "Coming!" The lookout's call was calm. They had grown used to visitors. A small group from town appeared around the valley's hidden entrance, led by Sheriff Wilson's deputy. They brought mail, supplies, and news of Barrett's conviction. His scheme to use military authority for land grabbing had earned him 5 years in territorial prison. Justice comes in many forms, Running Deer observed, joining Sarah at the window. Some fast like lightning, some slow like growing trees. This valley, she gestured to the thriving community before them. This is the slowest, strongest justice, the kind that changes hearts. Sarah touched the land deed, feeling the weight of what they had built. Every day brought new challenges, new adjustments, new learning. But watching Emma play with her friends, seeing James teach Apache youth about cavalry horses while learning tribal tracking methods himself, observing her father deep in trade negotiations that respected both cultures' values, she knew they had found something rare and precious. "We're writing a new story," she said softly, remembering her words from months ago. Running Deer smiled, her weathered face gentle. "No, my friend, we are living one." The family Bible rested open on a blanket woven with Apache symbols of unity and blessing. Sarah traced the newest entry in its pages. James Connor and Sarah Mitchell, joined in marriage under God's sky and by Apache tradition, witnessed by two peoples become one. The winter sun painted the valley in shades of gold as final preparations were made for the ceremony. Running Deer had insisted on this day when the sun's path matched ancient markers in the valley walls. "A good time for new beginnings," she'd said, her eyes twinkling with ancient wisdom. Martha fussed with Sarah's dress, a unique creation that blended her mother's lace with beadwork crafted by the Apache women. "Something old, something new," the midwife murmured, adjusting the medicine pouch that still hung around Sarah's neck. "Though I suspect we're making our own traditions today." Emma twirled nearby in her own special dress, scattering flower petals and sage leaves in equal measure. At 3 years old, she had no sense of the historical significance of this day, but she understood joy well enough. "Pretty, Mama," she called out, her jade-green eyes sparkling. "Yes, my love," Sarah replied, watching her daughter dance between worlds with effortless grace. "Everything is pretty today." The ceremony itself broke every convention of both cultures, yet somehow honored them all. James stood tall in his formal jacket, but wore Apache symbols of protection beaded into his shirt. Sarah's father walked her not down an aisle, but along a spiral path marked with stones, each step representing the journey that had brought them here. Running Deer led the Apache blessing, her voice rising and falling like wind through mountains. Sheriff Wilson, who had gotten himself ordained for the occasion, spoke the Christian words with equal reverence. The prayers of two peoples rose together, neither diminishing the other. "Two stars may follow different paths through the night." "Sky," Running Deer proclaimed, "but they shine with the same light. So it is with truth, with love, with the Great Spirit who guides us all." When it came time for Emma's naming ceremony, incorporated into the wedding at Running Deer's suggestion, the little girl stood perfectly still, seeming to understand the moment's importance. Her Apache name, Dawn Child, acknowledged her, a role as one of the first to bridge their peoples. The Bible recorded both names side by side, a testament to her dual heritage. Martha, who had been nominated as Emma's official grandmother in Apache tradition, wrapped the child in a special blanket. "She carries both bloodlines now, proper and legal in the eyes of all," the midwife announced proudly. The celebration that followed defied any single cultural tradition. Apache drums kept time with fiddle music from town. Traditional dances evolved into new forms as settlers and tribal members joined in together. Food from both cultures filled long tables, and stories were exchanged in 2 languages, sometimes simultaneously. Sarah's father surprised everyone by presenting a gift he'd commissioned, a new page for the family Bible, illustrated by artists from both communities. It showed the valley in delicate watercolors, surrounded by symbols of both peoples' faiths. "So future generations will know where their story truly began," he explained, his voice thick with emotion. As evening approached, Running Deer gathered everyone for a final blessing. "The winter comes," she intoned, "but it finds us strong together. The valley shelters us, as the love of family shelters the heart. What has been joined here? Two peoples, two hearts, two traditions. Let no force of man or nature tear asunder." James held Sarah close as the stars began to appear above the valley walls. Emma had fallen asleep in Martha's arms, the new blanket wrapped snugly around her small form. Around them, their unprecedented community celebrated not just a wedding, but the birth of something larger, a new way of living, of seeing, of being family. "Look," James whispered, pointing to where the evening's first star shone directly over. "The valley's heart. A good sign," Running Deer would say. Sarah smiled, touching the Bible where their names were now recorded for posterity. "No, my love, not just a sign, a promise." Emma's journal lay open on her small desk, its pages already containing her first attempts at both English letters and Apache symbols. The leather-bound book had been Running Deer's gift on her 4th birthday, for the one who will tell our story to the next generation. 1 year had passed since the wedding that united more than just two hearts. The valley had flourished through its first full cycle of seasons, proving Running Deer's wisdom in choosing this sheltered place. New lodges and cabins dotted the landscape, while gardens flourished with both native plants and settler crops growing side by side. Sarah watched her daughter practicing her writing, jade-green eyes focused intently on the task. The morning sun streamed through windows that faced both east and west, James's idea to honor both traditions of tracking time and light. "She has her father's determination," Martha observed, pausing in her preparation of medicines. The midwife's workroom had become a teaching space, where both cultures' healing traditions were preserved and shared. Outside, James's voice carried up from the training ground where he worked with young men from both communities, teaching a unique combination of cavalry horsemanship and Apache riding techniques. Their daughter's name occasionally rang out as riders passed. "Dawn, child," they called, using her Apache name with the easy familiarity of true family. Sarah's father had returned briefly to Boston, only to come back with more Eastern families interested in their experiment in cooperation. The valley's success had begun to draw attention from other territories, where tensions between settlers and tribes remained high. Running Deer now regularly hosted visitors from other Apache bands, sharing their model of preserved independence within the letter of reservation law. "Mama, look!" Emma held up her journal proudly. On the page, she had drawn her family with remarkable clarity for her age. The figures wore a mixture of Western and Apache clothing, and around them she had carefully copied Running Deer's symbols for protection and love. Sarah gathered her daughter close, breathing in the sage, sweet scent of her hair. Through the window, she could see her grandmother's rocking chair on the porch, where the old woman sat with Apache elders each evening, their shared wisdom creating new stories from old truths. The medicine pouch still hung beside James's cavalry, badge on their wall, no longer just reminders of the past, but symbols of a future they had dared to imagine. Their daughter would grow up knowing both worlds, not as separate spheres to be bridged, but as one unified heritage to be celebrated. As if summoned by her thoughts, James appeared in the doorway, his smile as warm as the day she'd first seen it across a Boston ballroom. Behind him, Running Deer approached with fresh herbs for Martha's lessons. The evening would bring the whole community together for storytelling, where tales from both cultures would weave together under the vast desert stars. Emma returned to her journal, adding more figures to her drawing. Martha, Running Deer, her grandfather, the sheriff, all the extended family she had gained. Sarah touched her own journal, now filled with their story, and smiled. They had come full circle, finding home not in any one tradition, but in the love that had dared to imagine something new. Their story, like the valley itself, had become a testament to the power of choosing love over fear, understanding over prejudice, and the courage to believe in possibilities that others couldn't yet see.